Have you ever wondered why modern love, despite all its glittering promises, feels more like loneliness than true connection? Why so many women and men, surrounded by endless options, still lie awake at night feeling unseen, untouched at the soul? The answer does not live on the surface of dating apps, text messages, or Instagram stories. It lies far deeper, within the architecture of the psyche itself, in the wounds passed down from archetype to archetype, and in the forgotten wisdom of the unconscious. Today's love often unfolds as performance. A man projects what he thinks a woman desires, and a woman mirrors back what she believes will keep his attention. Two masks fall in love, while the real selves remain hidden in the shadows. Jung warned of this phenomenon. When love becomes a projection, you do not meet the other as they truly are. You meet only your own reflection cast upon their face. What follows is not intimacy, but illusion. And when the illusion fades, what remains is emptiness. This emptiness is not just heartbreak. It is the collapse of a dream that never truly existed. In this theater of masks, loneliness thrives even inside the relationship. You could be lying in the same bed as someone and still feel oceans apart. The distance is not physical, it is psychological. An abyss formed by silence, by unspoken fears, by egos terrified of vulnerability. The modern condition trains people to guard themselves, to keep their hearts armored. Yet the paradox is clear. The armor you wear to avoid pain becomes the very cage that ensures it. The ego craves recognition, validation, and constant reassurance. But connection cannot be built on the shaky foundation of need. True connection demands presence, a radical seeing of the other person beyond their usefulness, beyond the roles they play. Without this, relationships become transactions. He offers attention, she offers beauty, he offers status, she offers support. Beneath the surface, both feel unseen, because what they truly long for, the meeting of soul to soul, is missing. And so, modern love feels like starvation dressed as a feast. You, too, have likely felt it. That strange hollowness when a conversation feels scripted, when affection feels conditional, when silence between two lovers is not comforting but suffocating. It is not that people are incapable of love. It is that they have been conditioned to confuse attachment with love, desire with intimacy, distraction with presence. Jung would call this a collective wound of the unconscious. Humanity trapped in patterns that repeat endlessly until someone dares to break free. Women especially sense this wound with sharp intensity. For centuries, the feminine was told to give, to nurture, to adapt, to lose herself in the needs of others. Modern love promised liberation, but in its place offered another prison, the prison of endless availability, of proving worth through sacrifice. Many women still find themselves carrying the emotional labor of relationships, trying to heal men who refuse to confront their shadows, trying to hold together bonds built on fractures. And the result? Exhaustion. Emptiness, a loneliness that whispers, you are giving everything, yet you are unseen. But the loneliness is not simply a curse, it is also a signal, a voice from the unconscious calling you back to yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." The same is true for woman. When modern love collapses into loneliness, it is often because the soul is demanding that you stop chasing echoes and turn inward to meet your own depths. To seek connection outside before you have entered communion with yourself is to build upon sand. This is where the shadow enters. Every relationship is a mirror of your unhealed places. If you feel invisible, ask, where have you abandoned your own visibility? If you feel unloved, ask, where have you withheld love from yourself? Jung knew that projection was not a mistake of the psyche, but a pathway. The partners you attract are not accidents. They are messengers, carriers of the lessons your unconscious is begging you to face. Until you do, modern love will remain a cycle of loneliness, because the person you most long to meet is hidden within. There is also the myth of constant availability. In a world of instant messages and digital surveillance, people confuse accessibility with intimacy. But true intimacy is not built in the flood of constant communication. It arises in the depth of silence, in the mystery of distance, in the courage to let someone miss you. Epictetus said that if you want to be loved, love yourself first. Yet modern love has inverted this truth. People give pieces of themselves away, hoping to earn what they already possess if only they dared to claim it. Worth. So modern love feels like loneliness because too many are bargaining with their shadows, hoping another person will rescue them from the emptiness they refuse to confront. But no one can. To expect another to heal your loneliness is to hand them a burden that will crush them. Loneliness, paradoxically, must be embraced. Only then does it alchemize into solitude, and from solitude comes strength. From strength comes the power to choose, not from desperation, but from sovereignty. And in that sovereignty, connection ceases to feel like grasping. It becomes flow. It becomes two souls meeting not in hunger, but in wholeness. That is the antidote to the loneliness of modern love. Not more partners, not more performance, but more truth. Truth of who you are, truth of what you refuse, truth of what your soul demands. The truth of this hunger is that it is not new, it is ancient. From the myths of Psyche and Eros to the tragedies of Tristan and Isolde, humanity has always wrestled with the paradox of love, the yearning for union and the terror of losing oneself within it. What has changed is the stage on which this drama unfolds. In modernity, where the individual is taught to brand themselves, to be constantly desirable, constantly accessible, love has become another form of performance. And performances, no matter how captivating, end in silence. When the curtain falls, what remains is the loneliness of not being truly seen. Jung would argue that modern relationships suffer from inflation of the ego. Men inflate their power, women inflate their desirability, both wearing masks to keep the illusion alive. Yet, the psyche knows the truth. Beneath the surface is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. This fear drives much of modern intimacy, but fear is a poor foundation. It builds relationships that resemble fortresses, imposing from the outside yet hollow within. And when the hollow space echoes too loudly, loneliness seeps in like water through stone. Consider the archetype of the lover. At its highest, it is devotion, creativity, presence. But in its shadow, it becomes obsession, addiction, manipulation. Modern love is often trapped in that shadow, mistaking obsession for passion, possession for intimacy. When a woman feels the rush of being pursued endlessly, she may confuse it with depth, not realizing that what she is experiencing is hunger disguised as devotion. And when the pursuit cools, she feels abandoned, even though the bond was never truly anchored in soul. Do you see how the loneliness grows not from lack of love, but from love that never reached beyond the surface? The Stoics taught that external events are not under our control, only our responses are. The same is true of love. You cannot control who leaves, who betrays, who withholds, but you can control whether you allow these wounds to define your worth. The loneliness many feel is intensified not by solitude itself, but by the story told about solitude. I am alone, therefore I am unworthy. This is the false narrative. The deeper truth is this: loneliness is not proof of lack, but proof of desire for something greater than performance. Proof of a soul that refuses to settle for illusions. Shadow work reveals another dimension. Much of what one craves in a partner is often the reflection of what is denied within. A woman who longs for protection may have abandoned her own inner warrior. A man who seeks nurturing may have suppressed his own inner mother. Thus, relationships become unconscious contracts. I will carry what you refuse to hold, but no one can carry another's shadow indefinitely. The weight of suppressed aspects eventually breaks the bond, leaving both partners to confront what was hidden all along. And in that confrontation, loneliness emerges as a teacher. There is a cruel irony here. The more desperately one clings to avoid loneliness, the more one ensures it. Because desperation suffocates intimacy. When you cling, you demand rather than invite. You seek to possess rather than to connect. The unconscious feels this, and the dance turns heavy. Many relationships today collapse under this weight. Two people holding each other not in love, but in fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being unseen. Yet love born of fear cannot last. It will rot, leaving behind the bitter taste of loneliness even while two bodies still lie side by side. But within this bleak landscape lies an opportunity for transformation. Loneliness can be alchemized into power when faced with courage. The woman who sits with her solitude, rather than running from it, begins to hear her own voice again. She realizes she does not need to be endlessly available to prove her worth. She does not need to chase the validation of half-present men to feel alive. She does not need to accept love that tastes of crumbs when her soul demands a banquet. In her solitude, she becomes sovereign. And sovereignty is magnetic, for it is rooted not in hunger, but in fullness. When a woman reclaims this fullness, something shifts in the dynamics of love. She is no longer seduced by projection, no longer captivated by the performance of attention. She sees through the masks because she has faced her own. She recognizes when affection is genuine and when it is merely ego seeking nourishment. And in this clarity, her relationships transform. No longer prisons, they become mirrors, places of reflection, growth, and mutual becoming. And if a man cannot meet her there, she does not collapse. She lets him go, because she has already found what most never do: wholeness within herself. The modern epidemic of loneliness in love is not a punishment, it is a threshold, a call to step beyond the shallow scripts and into the raw depth of self-knowing, to face the shadow, to embrace solitude, to demand truth. And only then, connection ceases to be another performance. It becomes something rare, something enduring. It becomes the sacred meeting of two souls who no longer run from themselves. What begins to emerge when one confronts this threshold is a profound recognition. Most of what passes for love today is a negotiation between wounds. The anxious cling to the avoidant. The abandoned chase the unavailable. The insecure adorn themselves with masks of perfection. Two people enter the dance not as sovereign beings, but as fragmented psyches begging the other to complete what feels broken within. Jung called this the anima and animus projection. The feminine hidden within man projected onto woman. The masculine buried within woman projected onto man. What feels like chemistry is often the unconscious crying out, "Here is the piece of me I have denied." But until it is integrated, until each takes responsibility for their own inner fragments, love will keep echoing as loneliness. This explains why so many women speak of being with someone, yet feeling invisible. The man touches her body, but not her soul. He listens, but he does not hear. His eyes see her form, but not her essence. It is not malice, it is blindness, the blindness of a man, still lost in his own unexamined shadow. And yet, the woman endures, because she too has been conditioned to equate her worth with her ability to hold, to forgive, to mend what was never hers to fix. She gives and gives, hoping that eventually her giving will awaken his seeing. But what awakens is her exhaustion. And in the quiet moments, she feels it. the loneliness of being unrecognized even in love's embrace. This is the silent epidemic of modern intimacy. Two people mistaking proximity for connection. Bodies pressed together, yet hearts galaxies apart. Words exchanged daily, yet truths left unsaid. Screens glowing late at night, while souls dim with neglect. In such spaces, loneliness is not the absence of someone beside you. It is the absence of being met at the level where it truly matters. The soul. The Stoics remind us that no external force can rob us of our inner freedom unless we consent. "You may chain my body," wrote Epictetus, "but my mind will remain free." The same applies to love. A woman may feel chained by neglect, starved by shallow attention, yet her essence remains untouchable if she chooses it. The chain begins to break when she withdraws her worth from the hands of others and returns it to her own. When she realizes that loneliness in a relationship is not a verdict on her value, but a reflection of the other's inability to meet her depth. That recognition alone begins to turn despair into clarity. But clarity demands courage. Courage to face the uncomfortable truth that not all who claim to love you are capable of it. Courage to stop mistaking breadcrumbs for a feast. Courage to stand in solitude rather than kneel for companionship that corrodes the soul. This courage is the beginning of individuation, the sacred Jungian path of becoming whole. Individuation requires breaking the illusions of dependency, of projection, of savior fantasies. It demands that you stand face to face with your shadow, see its hunger, its fears, its rage, and claim them as yours. Only then can you choose love from freedom, not from lack. Loneliness becomes transformative when it is no longer resisted. When you sit with it, it begins to speak. It tells you where you have betrayed yourself, where you have given pieces of your soul in exchange for fleeting affection, where you have silenced your voice to keep someone else comfortable. It whispers that you have been asking for love in all the wrong places because you were afraid to ask it of yourself. And once you hear this voice, you cannot return to ignorance. You begin to understand that the loneliness was never punishment. It was initiation. In this initiation, a woman rediscovers the archetype of the sovereign. Not the princess who waits, not the maiden who pleases, but the queen who chooses. The sovereign does not beg for connection. She creates it. She does not chase attention. She embodies presence. She does not shrink to fit another's comfort. She expands and lets those who cannot match her fall away. Loneliness becomes her crucible, burning away illusions, leaving behind only the gold of self-worth. From this place, love itself changes form. No longer a desperate search for completion, it becomes a meeting of two whole beings, each carrying their own shadows with awareness. Loneliness dissolves not because someone filled the emptiness, but because emptiness was faced and transmuted. What emerges is a love rooted in truth, sometimes fierce, sometimes tender, but always real. A love where silence is not frightening, but sacred. A love where distance does not wound, but deepens. A love that reflects not desperation, but sovereignty. And yet, many resist this path because it feels too costly. To walk it means letting go of half-loves, of illusions, of attention that soothes but never satisfies. It means enduring the silence after the performance ends. It means standing alone long enough to remember who you are. But what is the alternative? To stay in relationships where loneliness becomes a second skin. To surrender your soul for the comfort of proximity. That is not love. It is exile. Loneliness, then, is not the enemy. It is the threshold every woman must cross if she is to reclaim herself. It is the dark night that births dawn, and when dawn comes, she realizes she never needed saving. She needed only to awaken. When she awakens, everything begins to look different. The very patterns that once entrapped her start to reveal their hidden messages. That relationship where she felt invisible becomes not just a wound, but a mirror, reflecting her own forgotten need to see herself. The men who adored her body but overlooked her essence become reminders of how often she herself abandoned her essence to be adored. The loneliness that once felt unbearable now stands as proof that her soul will not allow her to settle for less than truth. In awakening, the pain does not vanish, but it transforms. It becomes wisdom. Jung taught that the unconscious will continue to present us with the same lessons until we integrate them. The reason modern love feels like loneliness for so many is because the collective unconscious is crying out for integration. Humanity has overvalued the ego, success, appearances, status, and undervalued the soul. Women especially have been trained to perform rather than to be, to please rather than to embody. And so, relationships collapse under the weight of performance. They break not because love is impossible, but because illusion is unsustainable. Illusion always cracks, and when it does, the raw silence beneath feels like loneliness. But in truth, it is the silence of the soul finally being heard. To meet this silence requires discipline, the kind the Stoics spoke of when they reminded themselves daily of mortality. "You could leave life right now," wrote Marcus Aurelius. "Let that determine what you do and say and think." In love, this awareness sharpens perspective. Why waste years in bonds that leave you starving when your days are finite? Why trade your essence for validation when the only true possession you carry is your own soul? To embrace mortality is to strip away illusions. And stripped bare, one realizes, loneliness is not the tragedy. Living unseen, unloved in truth, is. Yet the tragedy remains common because many cling to the fantasy of rescue. They wait for the partner who will finally complete them, the soul who will dissolve their loneliness. But this is projection, the anima and animus crying out once more. No one rescues you from loneliness but yourself. Until you face that, every partner becomes another performance, another stage on which your shadow plays out. You call it love, but beneath it lies dependency. You call it passion, but beneath it lies hunger. And hunger can never be satisfied by another's soul. It must be fed by your own. Imagine the shift when a woman realizes this truth. She no longer looks outward with desperation. She cultivates within. She reads, she prays, she meditates, she creates, she breathes herself back into fullness. And in that fullness men approach differently. Some are intimidated, others are magnetized. For the sovereign woman cannot be seduced by shallow attention. She is not fooled by flattery, not enchanted by temporary gestures. She sees into the archetype of the man before her, sensing whether he stands in his own wholeness or hides behind performance. Her loneliness has trained her sight. Her solitude has sharpened her discernment. What once felt like curse has become gift. But there is a shadow even here. The temptation to armor the heart so fully that no one is let in. Some women, scorched by loneliness in love, choose to protect by withdrawal. Yet true sovereignty is not withdrawal. It is openness without dependence. To love without needing. To give without losing. To connect without dissolving. That is the art of the individuated soul. Loneliness teaches this paradox. You can stand whole and still open, sovereign and still tender. You can offer your heart without demanding it fill your emptiness. For you have already faced the emptiness and discovered it is not bottomless. It is a well of strength. This kind of love terrifies the unprepared. A man who has not faced his shadow will recoil from a woman who stands in sovereignty, because she does not play the scripts his ego expects. She will not mother him, flatter him, or shrink to soothe him. She will invite him to meet her in truth, and truth is unbearable for the unready. But for the one who has walked his own path of individuation, She is not a threat, but a revelation. Together, they do not cling out of fear. They walk side by side out of choice. This is not modern love as performance. It is ancient love reborn. Soul to soul, shadow to shadow, light to light. And so, loneliness, instead of being the enemy, becomes the guardian of this higher love. It ensures you do not remain trapped in illusions. It burns away the false so that only the true can remain. To embrace it is to embrace transformation itself. To resist it is to condemn yourself to endless cycles of half-loves and hollow connections. Which will you choose? To keep performing in the masquerade of modern love, or to strip away the mask and stand sovereign, even if it means standing alone until the real arrives? Because here is the paradox every awakened woman knows. The moment you are no longer afraid of loneliness is the moment you are no longer lonely. In that stillness, in that sovereign peace, you become whole. And wholeness is the very soil where love, real, lasting, soul-anchored love, can finally grow. The woman who steps into wholeness begins to recognize that her deepest loneliness was never about the absence of others. It was about the absence of herself. She sees how much of her energy was spent performing, chasing, adapting to roles that silenced her truth. In her sovereignty, she no longer feels compelled to mold herself into the image of what is desirable. Instead, she embodies what is real. And, paradoxically, this authenticity draws others to her with greater force than any performance ever could, because people are starved for what is genuine. They sense the difference between a mask and a presence. Presence cannot be faked. It emanates. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming who you truly are by integrating the unconscious. Loneliness in modern love is the crucible of this process. When the illusions fall away and you are left with only yourself, you face the shadow. The shadow may whisper of abandonment, of rejection, of unworthiness. It may replay the wounds of childhood, the neglect, the silence, the unmet needs. Many women run from this moment, leaping into the arms of another relationship, another performance, to drown out the whispers. But the whispers do not disappear. They grow louder until faced, and when faced, they transform. The voice of the shadow becomes the voice of power, reminding you, you are the one you were waiting for. This transformation alters the way love itself is understood. No longer a desperate search for completion, it becomes a conscious union between two whole beings. You no longer confuse attention with intimacy or availability with devotion. You know the difference between someone who reaches for you out of hunger and someone who reaches for you out of choice. You know the difference between passion that burns to consume and love that burns to illuminate. And this knowing protects you from falling into the loneliness of shallow bonds again. The Stoics would call this mastery of perception. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Much of the loneliness people feel in love is intensified by the stories they attach to it. He hasn't texted, therefore I am unworthy. She is distant, therefore I am unlovable. But these are not truths. They are interpretations born of wounds. The reality is often simpler. Another's distance reflects their own shadows, not your inadequacy. Once you see this, you stop writing tragedies with your own blood. You let others carry their shadows while you remain anchored in yours. Loneliness no longer defines you. It refines you. In this refinement, a new archetype emerges, the alchemist. She who turns pain into wisdom, solitude into strength, longing into presence. The alchemist does not curse the loneliness of modern love. She thanks it. For it was in that emptiness that she discovered her gold. Without it, she would have remained lost in illusions, forever mistaking mirrors for windows. With it, she sees clearly. And seeing clearly, she no longer bargains with her worth. What follows is liberation. The woman no longer fears being alone. and therefore she no longer clings. She no longer measures her value by the warmth of another's gaze. She no longer bends her boundaries to hold a love that cannot hold her. Her solitude has taught her that peace is better than proximity, that truth is better than attention, that sovereignty is better than sacrifice. And so, when she chooses love again, she does so from fullness, from sovereignty, from strength. Men who meet her here find themselves transformed, for she does not nurture their illusions, she calls them to their depth. She does not validate their ego's games, she invites their soul's emergence. Some flee, but those who stay awaken. Because love at this level is no longer performance, it is initiation. Two souls, each having faced their own loneliness, now meeting not to escape themselves, but to expand together. This is love beyond modern scripts. It is rare. It is sacred. It is the kind of love that does not feel like loneliness because it is rooted in truth. The closing paradox is this. Modern love feels like loneliness until you no longer fear being alone. Once you embrace solitude as teacher, once you integrate your shadow, once you reclaim your sovereignty, the loneliness dissolves. What remains is freedom. The freedom to choose love, to release love, to walk away, to stand firm, to stay open. And in that freedom, you are never truly alone, for you walk with yourself, whole at last. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.